We are live. It is Thursday, July 16th, 2020, 5:03 p.m. We are 3 minutes late because of a mysterious echo that has crept up on Washington. Like all the worst things in the world, it just kind of shows up and you can't identify the cause. But I have really good news, people. A really important milestone was crossed, I think at midnight last night, which is that the episode number of In Lieu of Fun now exceeds at 112 the number of days until Election Day, which is only 111.
Oh.
And that means we have had more days in which we have gotten together at 5 o'clock p.m., had a drink with an interesting person, then there are days left until we have the opportunity to get rid of Donald Trump. So there you go. Kate has more good news for you. It involves sourdough starter and infused butter. We are not allowed to have fun anymore, but what she is about to tell you comes awfully close. And as Kate tells you this story, Mike Chase, our guest, whom I will introduce momentarily, see how many federal crimes you can identify in this story.
Mike just literally, oh good, you got a legal pad and everything. That's so official. Okay. All right. I'm going to redact large portions of this. Tell me if the redaction is going to change the federal nature of the crime.
Sure.
But I don't think so. Okay.
I think the moment you say you got in the mail, we've got federal jurisdiction.
I know. Well, I wasn't going to say that, Ben. But thanks. Thanks a lot, Ben. The story starts, I guess, way back in like the end of March, when people were all aflutter on all of the internets about sourdough starter. And I happen to have a excellent sourdough starter that is like 35 years old. And it comes from this farm in Montana that I work on, and it is just so good. And so I put out on Twitter one day, listen, if you send me your address, like if you DM me your address, the first 6 people to DM me, I will send you a package of this like incredible sourdough starter. And 6 random people on the internet, completely random, like never met them before in my life, messaged me and said, yeah, I would love some sourdough starter. So I made up a ton of sourdough starter and I packaged it all up and I shipped it off. And I think none of them were actually thinking that I would follow through on this. So then I got a lot of like, holy shit, you actually sent me a sourdough starter. Who are you again? Like, did I respond to a tweet that you said? Like, no one remembered me. So that was fine. And I had like written these like beautiful kind of like, I'd illustrated them and everything. I'd made these handwritten instructions on how to feed it and like, a recipe where you could go for a recipe and sent it along with it. So anyways, one of the messages I get back is from this person who we will call, what's your name, Mike? What's your last name? Mike Chase. Yeah. We'll call this guy Mike Chase. And so I get this email from Mike Chase and he says, "Hi Kate. Thanks a bunch for mailing the starter to me in blank Midwestern state. Last night."
I think you got to identify the state, because let's just say a state where
a mountain region, certain
products are legal.
Yes.
Under state law.
Yes. Last night I fed it and it seems to be bubbly, so it appears to have survived the mail. Since we're getting hammered by a spring snowstorm, I worried the freezing temps might have killed it. As someone who loves to cook and refuses to bake, it really took these current times to get me excited about making bread. It also made me regret the time I turned down a 90-year-old sourdough starter offered to me by a 70-year-old gold miner. But I was in Alaska on a motorcycle with no way to care for it. Getting a starter from a stranger means a lot to me, even though I don't know the backstory. It's 25 years old. It's 35 years old. It's 25 years old, and it came in the mail from a writer I've never met. Now, that is now my starter's backstory. The handwritten instructions are especially meaningful, as I'll Xerox them to pass on the instructions to anyone I gift it to. Thank you. When I saw the package in the mailbox and realized what it was, my first reaction was to send a thank you email and offer to mail a homemade product in return. Though I don't bake, I do make infused butter to use in chocolate chip cookies that many friends and neighbors swear are the most enjoyable medicinal products they've ever had. Grown by a friend in something city at a something mountain pass at a something feet in elevation. The plants have been grown using cuttings taken from the same mother plant for nearly 15 years. The butter is deep green and makes a delicious batch of cookies that I'll freeze the dough that I freeze the dough to so that I'll have a fresh edible whenever life accommodates such a treat. If you'd like, I'll send some butter and you can make the cookie dough. If that's not your thing, you may consider your neighbors. If you have any retired neighbors in quarantine, they'd probably be pretty happy to find out some kind soul has left some space cookies on their porch with instructions. When I got your starter, I wondered who it was from. On Twitter, I follow PhD and all but dissertation writers, journalists, wonk, scientists, and subject matter experts. But I don't know where you fell into or how I'd end up following you. Several weeks ago, you were on Lawfare with Quinta regarding disinformation, and it was so good I found and followed. When I realized the sourdough came from a Lawfare person, I almost lost my nerve and didn't offer to send this butter. I can't imagine Benjamin Wittes smoking a J and being chill.
Nailed it.
Then I noticed. This is kind of my favorite part. Then I noticed your address is PO Box 420. That is true. And I figured it's a sign to take my own advice and acknowledge the worst you can say is no thank you. Peace, Mike Chase.
Right, which for anybody who's joined, we should just note is the pseudonym you've used for this person, right? Again, this was not signed Mike Chase.
Yes, to all listeners and viewers in federal law enforcement.
Exactly.
Mike Chase is the pseudonym, not the actual name.
Right. Yeah.
So
I wrote back.
That was months ago now. And
it was many months.
Had a good laugh over that story.
I read that in April.
What happened today, Kate?
Today I got a package in the mail.
Okay, this isn't
Today
privileged.
I got a package anymore.
None of this is privileged.
I know. I got a package in the mail, and it was like hermetically sealed and in like very professional condition. It wasn't like some sketchy thing wrapped in saran paper or anything. It was like vacuum sealed. And I had received this morning an email from Mike Chase saying, who I had not heard from in some time, saying, I'm so sorry that I let the ball drop on this basic. So I'll read you what he says. While I certainly wasn't organized and on top of things before COVID, so I'm not sure why I thought I'd magically fix things during a pandemic, but I did finally go to the post office and it should be delivered today. After an embarrassingly long delay, I sent you enough to make 2 batches. Hopefully 120 cookies will be enjoyable for you and your friends, acquaintances, and more. In the last couple months, I should tell you I've mastered sourdough pizza. It's really amazing. Thanks a million for that. This staying at home without income or human interaction has been hell. When I ventured out to the post office on Monday, it was closed from 2 to 3 without explanation. So I walked across the street to one of my old favorite bars. It used to be owned by an old friend of mine named Gary. And Gary's blank motor club and Grub was an upscale biker bar on Broadway in blank. Gary got killed in Mexico a couple years ago, right. And I hadn't been back since his funeral celebration at the bar. It reopened a few weeks ago as a fancy taco shop with the same great patio. Having not been to a bar since March and rarely interacting live with other humans, it was a bit weird, scary even. But I walked over, sat down on the patio, ordered a sour rosé from a local brewery, and waited for the post office to reopen. One beer turned into three and a spicy tequila cocktail. Getting day drunk on a patio was so damn good for my soul that I actually acknowledged some good came out of my months-long procrastination. I'm bummed you had to wait forever to get the space cookies, but the universe was kind enough to make some good come from it. Pre-pandemic, I'd never have guessed that drinking alone at a bar would be something to celebrate. Then again, I never thought I'd be a baker. Peace, Mike Chase.
Okay.
So what showed up, Kate?
I don't know. Just some Ziploc bags.
Some Ziploc
A collection of atoms arranged in some way.
So
I
Chase,
love this person's voice, though. It is like an incredible voice.
Yeah, he can write.
Yeah,
So
he
Mike
really
Chase,
can.
how many crimes can we count?
Well, so yeah, you've got
The proper
think
postage was affixed to the thing. Just FYI, it included an Elvis stamp, a Walt Disney stamp, and a Beatles stamp.
Right, the classic trio. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's how you know it's legit. Well, I mean, so at one point this dough appeared to be surprise dough. So I just wrote in my notes unsolicited dough ? So I think that you may have had some interstate transportation of unsolicited dough, right? Which is an issue. Okay. There is a statute about sort of sending unsolicited merchandise and then expecting people to pay you for it, right?
It was free.
Right. So you don't have an issue there. I think that you're probably okay. But I don't know. We'll see. And then I noticed, so there was this little diversion that we didn't go down, which is this sourdough starter that this gentleman turned down from this a 70-year-old coal mine or a gold miner
In Alaska.
And right. So I don't know. I mean, like,
that's just poor judgment. I don't know if that's a federal crime.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, like, I think soliciting a minor for dough is an issue. So you may have to be careful about that. I don't know.
Particularly if it's for immoral purposes.
That's right. So right.
Yeah.
Soliciting a minor for dough, I think, is an issue. And if somebody said in the comments here, Mann Act. I mean, look, if anybody tries to get that minor to come across state lines, that's very clearly in violation of federal law. But that might be subject to a motion to dismiss. Look, obviously, we're playing the Carmen Sandiego game here. I think we can all identify what state we're talking about here. So subject to state law, there might be some issues. But I really think that you're okay here. Now there were big concerns as we've talked about before about butter, right? Like back, 200 years ago, the feds were a lot more concerned about butter. So I think that they've kind of cooled out about that. Now, if this was margarine, weed margarine, or whatever substance margarine, you might have an issue. Like if it was like Lee Iacocca's weed margarine or something like that, like whatever,
Mike,
weed Olivio.
I'm still having a little trouble with the use of the mail for transportation of
that's
controlled
clearly
substance.
Wait.
That's not that. Right. Butter being the controlled substance. I mean, look, when you started talking about this second shipment, I was like, I might have to go get my sentencing guidelines because this may be more of a sentencing guidelines
I had the same
question.
thought. 120 cookies. 120 cookies.
Yeah. Look, luckily, it's interesting. I would just say that this substance, you're not a chemist. I can't give you legal advice, especially not in a privileged conversation. But look, who among us has not had unsolicited weed butter show up, on our doorstep? Who among us? Right.
Yeah. Now, what are this? Of course, not a legal advice conversation.
Right.
But in theory, if you receive a package containing a bunch of melted butter,
yeah,
and you might have reason from context of certain letters to suspect that it has, it's been infused with something,
Right.
but you don't quite know what. It's never been explicit. It's not like someone wrote on it,
Yeah.
infused with fentanyl.
Yeah.
Right? So you don't know, but you could be reasonably suspected of suspecting that there might be a substance that is legal under state law but not under federal law. You did not solicit the butter. You certainly did not solicit the substance. Do you have any obligations of due diligence to check out your butter, or can you just treat it like butter and make cookies? And if people experience pleasure from it, then that's really their business.
Well, I think pleasure is not really necessarily segregable, right? And so one of the issues, like anybody's going to experience pleasure from cookies, and so how can you tell whether you're just experiencing regular cookie level of pleasure or something above and beyond that, right? So I don't know if you can get an answer on that. But there is no duty of due diligence. In fact, I was reminded as we were talking about this.
Wait, is that true?
Yeah. What?
You don't
what?
have to know that it's like marijuana butter.
Oh no!
When you go to the supermarket,
you do for liability.
And you buy a stick of butter, Kate.
Sure.
You're not obliged to test it to see if
right.
there was marijuana injected into it.
Yes,
Right.
that's true.
And the way, as we all know, that federal criminal intent works is you have no obligation here. If you have no intent, it's totally fine. But the way that it works is the feds convene a grand jury, they indict you, they charge you, and then you get convicted and you get to argue that to the United States Supreme Court, right? So that is the way that you defend yourself on intent, right? You're not going to go to the feds and say,
before the United States Supreme Court.
Right. You just get cert, and then there you go. No, but there was a case, United States versus Powell. It wasn't this exciting kind of butter that showed up, but a person had a box show up on their front step that contained like 2 shotguns and a bunch of razor blades and hacksaw blades and various and sundry ammunition, totally unsolicited. And the idea was that somebody was sending this to an address so that someone else they knew who did not live there could go pick it up from the stoop, right? So that there would be no record of it having been transported to this particular person. But that person who received the hacksaw blades and shotguns, they faced no criminal liability. But they did then turn it over to the feds, and that is how Powell ended up getting charged.
But of course, they knew that it was a bunch of shotguns and hacksaw blades, whereas Kate only maybe has certain reason to suspect that the butter that she knows is infused with something that might be legal under state law but not legal under federal law.
Pineapple, right? It could be infused with that.
In both states it is in that the state that I'm in and the state coming from it's legal, but that doesn't make any difference for the use of federal mail. So the weird thing though, Mike, okay, is like if this was my only random encounter with people just giving me marijuana that I don't want, that would be one thing.
Yeah.
But this is the second such incident during this pandemic, because I was also walking across a parking lot that was like full of people. There was like, it was broad daylight. It was like the middle of whatever. I was carrying like 8 scones and like 3 coffees and like going to my car and in a mask. And I'm like, and like and I'm like in the corner of my eye, I see like this baggie on the ground next to another car. And it's like kind of almost like, it's kind of like lying there. And there's like tons of people around. And I'm like, is that a bag full of marijuana? Like, and so I go to the car and I put the stuff in the car. And then I kind of just like, because I'm curious, walk back over to this baggie. And sure enough, it is like more than half an ounce of marijuana.
According to your scale.
According to my fingers, which are very good at measuring this. Right. I am just like a human, like, yes. And so I don't even partake in this particular, honestly, I don't like, and I'm like, I'm not particularly interested. That's not my vice. And like, why is the universe like as as Mike Chase has put it, why is the universe like conspiring to to shower me with marijuana? Like, I don't understand.
Well,
I think you have to take it as a sign.
These are the questions that trouble people's souls. All right. We're 23 minutes into the episode here. We haven't even introduced our guest.
Oh my God.
But that's okay, because he needs no introduction.
Yeah, that's true.
Because at Crime a Day is the funnest thing on Twitter, and the only thing on Twitter that I use the word funnest to describe. In fact, the only thing in the world, because it's not really a word. Mike was the anonymous Crime a Day for a long time until he outed himself in the true underneath their robes David Latt tradition of secretive legal bloggers. He is a criminal defense lawyer in Connecticut and sort of in DC, right, Mike?
Yeah, I've been floating around for a while. Yeah.
Are you barred in
got a-
Massachusetts?
I'm barred in New York and Connecticut.
Okay.
And
So
then
you're no
various
good,
federal courts.
is what you're
And
saying.
he's got a background in film.
I'll wave
which
in.
is-
I'll wave in. There's reciprocity, I think.
And
Sorry,
he's,
Ben.
And he's got a degree in film, which has always amused me. But mostly he's here right now because he's funny. And I woke up this morning in a bad mood and needed to be cheered up. So Mike, say something funny.
Oh, that's the worst way to lead into any kind of that's like dance monkey.
It's
like
so,
you can,
it's so
But that was pretty
unfair.
funny. You did it. It's okay.
It's so unfair.
it is the most unfair possible thing.
Yeah,
that-
okay,
that-
I'll get
but
I'll
no,
give
but you
you
get
a
what
fair-
you ask for. So I'm just gonna do an extended version of the aristocrats joke. So here we go. So no, I'm not gonna.
All right. No, I'll give you a better setup.
Sure.
Roger Stone.
Yeah, that's an interesting one, right?
It is.
Yeah, that's a wild one. And my favorite part about the whole story, because Frank, I have my own views about whether it should be legal or illegal to lie to the feds. You know, my view is that if it's going to be the Wild West, everybody should be able to lie to everybody, and we just sort of, it shouldn't be illegal. But
Yeah,
okay,
but
we live in a world where it
when
is.
when you coax other people to lie before a grand jury and you threaten their dog to do it, to get them to do it, you're in a little bit of a different territory.
It really depends on the dog. It totally depends on what kind of dog. But I'll agree with you in principle.
What kind of dog is that okay?
What kind of dog can you threaten? Well, a Bichon is totally fine. That's number one. Any kind of, I had a puggle, but a puggle, you can threaten a puggle. And no, I don't.
Anyone ever those little bitch mixed bougie dogs? Okay,
Yeah,
I got it.
Yeah. If the dog's name is Snowball or Puff, anything like that, then it's okay. No,
Yeah,
but I think the funny.
This one was low though, because Roger Stone, because Randy Credico is a guy who's like struggled with mental illness and stuff, and he has this dog Bianca who's kind of an emotional support animal. Like, he wouldn't go into the grand jury without her, and actually Mueller's people were fine with that. They let him take Bianca into the grand jury, and so threatening Bianca is really low.
Does anyone watch Rick and Morty?
It gets quoted to me all the time, but I never
Oh
watch
my
it. I
God.
probably shouldn't
There's
admit to
this great early episode of Rick and Morty in which the dog becomes sentient and designs robots that basically he controls the entire, he makes all of the humans his slave. And the dog's name is Snowball, and he says Snowball was my slave name, and every time they refer to him as Snowball. Anyways, it's sorry.
No, I'm with you. No, I look. I mean, I have an expansive reading of the material misstatements, the 1001 statute, where I've always been of the view that if it's okay for the feds to lie to you, you should be able to lie back to them. But let's talk about the ridiculous scenario here, which was endlessly entertaining to me, and I didn't think it'd get enough of the cycle, even though we know news cycles are like, I don't know, what are they, 20 something minutes long now, was this notion that there may not have actually been a commutation. And the judge said, I need you to prove to me that there's been a commutation. And then magically one appeared on Twitter. But to me, the notion of a federal judge saying, oh, you've been commuted, your sentence has been commuted by the president on the eve of your self-surrender, prove it. Is like,
yeah, well, I think the next time you have a client who's supposed to surrender, you should just say, by the way, the president's commuted his sentence. Just see if anyone calls you on it.
Well, I mean, it is true, and it's a crazy time. It's not just Roger Stone, right? It's Michael Cohen was an even crazier example, right? Where it's like the lawyer's worst nightmare, where you've got Michael Cohen saying, "Look, I understand that I'm out, and I know they want me to wear an electronic monitor like everybody who gets released during the pandemic, but I'm just thinking about telling them." Go F yourself, because I think I'm not going to put the bracelet on. And then the marshals show up and they say, we got to take you in because you're refusing sort of the most basic common release condition. And he goes, I'll put the bracelet on. And they say, it's too late. I mean, it's just like this notion of how crazy these self-surrenders are going right now is nuts, because for decades, look, I represented clients who are looking for just like a 2-day accommodation because they need to board their dogs for a self-surrender, right? Or like, or they need to get enough of a prescription so that when they self-surrender, they can bring enough of the prescription with them when they originally self-surrender. Now you've got sort of
they don't bring butter with infused.
They don't usually bring their butter. I was just saying, and this is another divergence, but like I posted this on Twitter the other day because you know how everything is cake now? Like everything is about cake, certain things that are secretly cake. Like I was just thinking the other day about that thing. Remember that thing where people would bring a cake to the prison, but there was a file inside?
Yes, totally.
And I was just thinking about that because we're all like, oh, sure.
Thing.
Yeah,
that's so common.
Yeah. But then somebody sent me an article about this history of files showing up at prisons inside cakes. It's like a real thing documented to happen. And I'm just wondering, who is this prison guard that's like, whoa, hey, what are you bringing in there? And they're like, oh, it's just a whole cake. And they're like, oh, okay, whole cake. Yeah, go ahead. Like, anyway, but I could see that happening in either of the Cohen or the Stone cases. We're probably not going to get to see the cake situation play out, but it's
well, why are we talking about Michael Flynn if we're going to talk about 1001? Like,
oh yeah, sure.
Sorry, not to put the hammer down, but we had a good talk with Ken White about that, and I think that basically, I would say, Ben, tell me if I'm wrong, but I think that Ken and I were basically like, well, if you're going to count 1001 as a real crime, and it shouldn't be, but if you do, he certainly committed it and he should be in jail for it. But it's not a real crime. And maybe and so it's hard to, it's just a way for the government to coerce things. It's just a tool for the government.
Absolutely. I feel bad because Ben asked me to come on because he wanted a good laugh, and we've already diverged into not a good laugh. But
basically,
I want to go back to a good laugh because Michael Flynn. I don't think.
Sorry, Ben. Ben.
Here's my question.
There's the Lisa Page puppet right there.
Where's
right? Oh wow. Yeah, okay.
I can't
pinned
see
her
you
up
guys.
to my wall. I like having Lisa around.
All right. Well, if the Lisa Page puppet has any questions for Mike Chase, we can arrange that. Here's my question that I think we could have some fun answering. What is the crime that we can commit on this show in the next 27 minutes that we can commit that is unambiguously a federal criminal offense that we are most confident we will get away with?
Yeah, so I always revert to the problem is my computer's not mobile. If I was on my cell phone, I would just take anything. I would take I don't know, this cup or something over here, and I would walk up to my neighbor's mailbox and I would put it in there with no stamp on it, and I would guaranteed have committed a federal crime by putting unstamped mailable matter.
Right. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Another, which would be fun to do if I had known we were going to be actually committing a federal crime, is I could go smash my own mailbox, even though I paid for it. It doesn't matter if it's your mailbox or somebody else's mailbox. If you destroy a mailbox, it is a federal crime. It could be yours. So if you back into your own mailbox with your car, you technically could be charged.
That one's nice.
Another good one is you could send me a couple of small Venmo transactions to avoid a reporting requirement, and we could commit some structuring on the show. As long as you don't want the money back. I mean, that's another thing that we could do. But
what
you know, again,
what if I sent you a small Venmo transaction, like a penny, and you sent me the Swiss coat of arms?
Yeah. You know what? I will tell you. So because we make big bucks doing these appearances on the In Lieu of show. If knowingly and for profit, I just say, ladies and gentlemen, to everybody out there in the audience, give a hoot, don't pollute.
Right, and if I pay you to say that,
no, I'm doing it knowingly.
A criminal offense.
Yeah. So you can send me the check. Offense? Well, it's Woodsy Owl's slogan, and it's a federal crime to use Woodsy Owl's slogan or likeness knowingly and for profit. Of course. Or Smokey the Bear. Yeah. Right. Exactly. So that's a problem. Or I tell you what, I could even just pretend right now. Let me just take a minute. I just pretended that I was a 4-H member. And pretending to be a member of 4-H is a federal crime. So I have now just committed, I think, 3 in rapid succession federal crimes on your show. That's pretty good.
That is good.
Probably in record time. Next time, get Guinness on here, and we can maybe get him. Well, actually, I don't know. There's probably other people who've committed more federal crimes in less time.
Like Roger Stone. But here's a question about let's debunk a few things.
Sure, yeah.
If you go upstairs or down the hall, depending on how your house is laid out, to your bedroom, and you grab the pillow and you tear that tag off of it that says "Do not remove under penalty of law."
He answered this the last time he was on.
But some people haven't heard it. Will you have committed a crime?
Only if you're not considered the end user of the pillow. So if you're just holding the pillow somewhere along its journey to a final user, then yes. But as a general matter, if it's your pillow, no, you're not committing a federal crime.
I'm actually curious. So Ben's question makes me want to ask this question, which is that, is it actually, like, you wrote your book about federal crimes, but given that, okay, so you're barred in New York and Connecticut, is it particularly harder to, is it particularly easier rather to violate federal crimes day to day, or is it easier to violate state law day to day? If you had to pick, you violate, so I mean, federal is very sexy. It's everyone can play, you know,
you.
but
you didn't have to say
yes.
that. Thank you.
but seriously, am I, I think it's kind of fascinating to know what the various, in some of these New England states, there's still a bunch of shitty laws in the books that are technically super puritanical and very, very weird.
Yeah. I love, in Connecticut until very recently, it's been a state crime to show a movie that even references venereal disease without a permit from the state board of health. So I always think of that movie, A League of Their Own, where Jimmy Dugan, Tom Hanks's character, talks about, he says, don't get the clap. That's what he signs a kid's baseball. He says, Jimmy Dugan, don't get the clap. That was technically a crime to show that movie when it came out, because you couldn't reference venereal disease in the movie. But I will say that state law actually is much easier to violate for a couple of reasons, and that's because virtually every state in the union has like a disorderly conduct statute. And the reason that it's easy to violate state law is because who the heck knows what disorderly conduct is.
And who, of course, wants to engage only in orderly conduct.
Exactly right. Like, way to be a conformist to be orderly
really
all the time.
Into sort of good shoes territory if you're not at least making a good faith effort to engage in
absolutely
conduct.
Or like in Connecticut, if you don't register your beehives by October 1st, if you have an unregistered beehive by October 1st,
well, I will tell Jeff. He's in California.
Like if you're making infused honey.
He drove his beehives actually to California against state law.
Yeah.
I shouldn't say this, but anyways, he
theoretically, in theory, he did that.
He was like, he in theory transported them across state lines in a truck.
Right.
And he was very nervous about it and was afraid of getting caught by the. Anyways, but yeah.
So
I really hope no law enforcement officials are watching this show right now.
Oh, of course, law enforcement officials are watching this. But
wait, really?
That is why we are only talking in hypothetical terms.
It's true.
Right.
So speaking about hypothetical terms, one of the things about your Twitter feed, if you were actually thinking about it in light of Kate's question, which is it easier to violate state law, is that what makes the Twitter feed funny is that the fact patterns are so peculiarly obscure.
Right.
And that it's actually hard to imagine somebody stumbling on some of these patterns of conduct by accident. Which is, of course, because you're leveraging implementing regulations against the text of presumably much broader statutes, and then working the reg to find the sort of most outlandish combination of referenced possibilities. But do state laws tend to have a set of corollaries to that? That is, general criminal authorities or broadly worded criminal authorities that are then implemented in interpreting regs that get super specific across a huge range of areas so that there's a fabric of criminal law that we actually don't know anything about.
Yeah, it certainly does happen. Some states more than others. Older states in the union tend to have more as a general matter. And where you see it most is in sort of taxation. Intoxicating liquors obviously is a big one. So good example is you'll have state statutes that then also have regulatory corollaries in some states that apply on the county by county level even. So a good example is in Virginia, because Virginia has this old history with rum runners, right, and moonshiners. There's all these regulations and statutory add-ons that are designed to tackle moonshining and rum running, which you would think would not come into play very often. But here's a good example: is for a long time, there was a concern about people using smoke screen devices on their cars in order to sort of obscure themselves and escape from revenue agents. In Virginia, they got really serious about it, and they said, look, in fact, we're going to make a rule that says that if you run an auto body shop or a car garage and you discover a smokescreen device on a car, so you put it up on the lift because you're fixing a busted caliper or something, and you discover what appears to be a smokescreen device, and you don't report that to the state, that is a crime in Virginia, right? And so you do end up having that. Now you also have the complicating factor of municipal ordinances, which can get really crazy, where you'll have criminal fine provisions where people who have let their grass be an inch or two too long for a period over the summer, and they've committed a crime. But I think the area where you're seeing it the most, and it's the most palpable right now, is this crazy statutes that make violations of any provision in any governor's executive order crimes in a lot of states. And so right now, obviously, there's concern about whether these masking rules are crimes or not crimes. Can you be fined? Can Cuomo do what he's saying he's going to do? The answer is yes. There's these criminal provisions where if you violate an emergency health order issued by the governor pursuant to that authority, you can have virtually limitless crime making because the governor need not go through the legislature. They can just issue an executive order. And so you do have it a lot. Yeah.
John Bordeaux writes, we can't have real sangria in Virginia restaurants because it's illegal to serve wine and liquor in the same drink.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Which is pretty awesome when you get right down to it, unless you want to drink sangria.
But I have a question really quickly. So so this is something that's always struck me as particularly batshit about state laws or local laws, which is that you'll kind of dig into some type of, and I use the example again about New England, but I'm sure they're in the mountain states and all of the other all of the states that have laws on the books that have never been enforced because they're no longer relevant for the time and place that we are now.
Yeah.
But what really bothers me about that is how much discretion is left in the hands of both law enforcement and prosecutors, which is just kind of which is not built in to how judges actually make their decision. So
that's right.
What I'm trying to say is okay, you have this 1800s law about not being able to wear a skirt that's above your knee.
Yeah.
And suddenly someone throws you in jail because for wearing a skirt above your knee or having shorts on, right? You're a woman and this is I don't know, sounds like something that would be in Massachusetts or Providence, Rhode Island or something. And this is kind of gets to the idea that when I was in high school and interning with the public defender in Rochester, New York, there was this moment that I was wait, what are burglary tools? All of these people have possession of burglary tools. What is that about? There's 30 people with burglary tools. I don't even know what that is. And they're oh no, that's whatever we find in their pockets are burglary tools.
That's
and
right.
And that's kind of the same type of idea, which is just you're going to throw the book at you're going to widely construe this rule to enforce something that's not very just. And it's one thing when you enforce something every 100 years or something like that. That seems kind of obviously crooked. But it's not that much less crooked to just kind of be iteratively deciding that a pen is a burglary tool. Or a credit card is a burglary tool, or a paperclip is a burglary tool. So yeah.
Well, you raise a really good example in my alma mater's magazine. Just recently, I just did our article, UConn magazine, about dancing on Sunday. Don't do that. And I talk about some of the crimes related to dancing in Connecticut, because for a long time it was a crime in Connecticut to dance on a Sunday, and people were arrested for it. But a way better example that has come up a lot is in New York, of course, right? There were these really oppressive laws that basically about serving drinks at a dancing place, and what they were mostly being used to do was to target gay bars, right? And so there were these sort of disproportionate enforcement to tackle what was a perceived sort of moralistic problem, because it was drafted in this arcane fashion. So that happens a lot. But I mean,
but it's this wink, wink, nudge, nudge. We all know what we're talking about, right? And it's no, after the norms move on, no one fucking knows what you're talking about anymore. And all you have in the book is this textual, kind of law that has to be, if it was actually construed and actually enforced, would be completely archaic.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. That's why this story about in Connecticut, an arrest that happened for dancing on a Sunday, is this police officer showed up to this guy's place, and the police officer says, if you have dancing, someone is going to get arrested. And he looked the police officer in the eye and he said, well, we're going to have dancing. And he was taken into custody. And it's just the most badass story ever. But
that's actually conspiracy to commit dancing on Sunday.
Right,
it's not. It's not even actually dancing.
Right. It's totally right. It's not,
right. But
like
could
if
you
you've done,
imagine
like,
getting
the Charleston in front of that?
So
Like,
exactly?
I want to get to the awesome and very important subject of writing manatee tattoos.
I was going to bring
but-
it up too.
Yeah, well, we got to get there. But before we do, you guys have like veered off onto a serious subject, and I want to close the loop
Sorry.
on it. Every bunch of years or so, somebody says the words, "We should catalog," you know, the federal criminal code in a systematic way and figure out how much of it we should get rid of. And it never happens. And as
Right.
far as I know, it never happens at the state level either. And
Right.
I don't know a single serious thinker about criminal law who doesn't think it should. That I mean, people might argue about how important a project it is, but like there's a lot of detritus of criminal law sitting around at the state, both the state and federal level. So why does it never happen that we have the great housekeeping act of 2000 whatever, and clean up all those puritanical New England statutes, get rid of the aberrant regulatory authorities that we attach criminal penalties to for no particularly good reason. Why does it never happen?
Quite frankly, we're seeing it right now. You just mentioned how we're closer now to the election than we were when you started the show, or we're past the halfway point, I should say, between when you started the show and the election. And we just heard Trump the other day talking about sort of bail reform, right, and talking about cash bail and how this has just led to this parade of horribles, right? Because inevitably recidivism exists, and so some people that were let out on bail earlier than they would have otherwise, they've committed crimes. Well, it's the same thing with cleaning up the code. Nobody wants to be the person who says, yes, let's repeal laws, and then have some eagle-eyed person point out, now this crime has occurred, and now we can't charge that person. Nobody wants to be soft on crime.
Wait a minute. All right, I buy that if you had like a rash of dead manatees from people who were riding them. But every few days you tweet about
I actually
cheese
think
crime.
that might be a thing. I thought that the thing that killed manatees was like motorboat motors or something.
That is one. Yeah. Dolphins.
Yeah, but if you repealed the riding manatee laws, and then a whole bunch of manatees turned up dead following, drunk, non-social distancing manatee riding, I'd be upset. So I can kind of get that. But the cheese crimes,
yep.
like I'm struggling to imagine a rash of crimes involving, cottage cheese that's a little bit too runny, that people don't get prosecuted for because we repealed.
Yeah. Yeah, overly moist Gouda
section of his book.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, there's not going to be an outcry about the unprosecutable wave of cheese crime.
But I think it is what you just touched on, right? It's your reaction to those crimes is that I get this. This is the sort of, I'm sure, Ben, I don't know if you ever get annoying responses to your tweets. I'm sure you don't. I'm sure that everybody's just polite and cordial every time that you tweet.
No, everybody's always very mature in response to my tweets.
But when I tweet, every night without fail, I get at least 2 or 3 people who always go, this is actually a pretty good law because of this one weird thing that happened in 1976, and we can't have that happening again. And so what I ultimately say is, yes, that is true, but should it be a imprisonable crime? Should it be something that can make a person into a criminal? And so people laugh at it. The argument will always be, we don't need to decriminalize because, come on, nobody's really getting charged with this stuff anyway. It's not that big of a problem. But there is a problem. There's a public trust problem when you say, we don't know how many federal crimes there are, and we're not willing to do anything about it. And so if there are 300,000 federal crimes, like, the number that gets thrown out there or more, then nobody's got interest in it because they just say, we're going to just trust federal prosecutors not to charge that case. That was the Migratory Bird Treaty Act issue. Second Circuit issued an opinion saying, yes, it is technically a crime that if you clean your plate glass windows too much and a bird flies into your window and breaks its neck and it's a migratory bird, you've committed a Migratory Bird Treaty Act violation. But you know what? We're just going to trust that prosecutors are going to do the right thing.
Well, that is the thing. That's what I just said. Like, that is the thing. That is the reason we have 300,000 laws. That is the reason that we don't have...
Absolutely.
That, Ben, as you bring up, like why we don't have people cutting down and narrowing and finally trimming back all of these like archaic laws that are based on prohibition, or when women used to wear bloomers, or like whatever the fuck. It's like these are not
there's a lot of cool old pirate laws.
Yeah.
Right.
That
there's like tons
I agree.
of
It is about when women used to wear bloomers or whatever the fuck. I mean, that I think is the exact answer, right? Which
all
is
right.
the quote of the episode.
I like you, Mike.
All of which
come on anytime and send me pop butter.
Sure. It'll be in the book when I send it to you. A hollowed out copy of my book with pot butter in it.
Critically
don't do that.
important subject
It's
of
like
the
God
Manatee
is laughing if you
rides
state your
tattoos.
plans, Mike.
I'm sorry, I talked
Manatee riding tattoos, Mike.
Oh yeah, what's
Tell
that
us
about?
the story.
So I'm afraid that there's not as much of a story as I would like there to be, other than the fact that I was in my kitchen last night cooking tacos at about, I don't know, like 9:30 at night, and I got a direct message from a longtime follower and appreciator of Twitter and a person who is actively involved in the criminal justice reform movement, sent me a message that was just a picture of him in the process of getting a person riding a manatee tattooed onto their leg.
But it has a figure number. Is that from your book?
It
is an actual illustration from your book?
It is figure 2-9 from my book. And so that person is the proud owner of this illustration from the book forever on their body, which I think is just a tremendous honor. So, I mean, I guess the better question is, so for you two, figure 2-9 is taken, but which figure will you both be having tattooed onto your bodies?
Oh, that's a great question.
Oh,
why
that
is
is
it
a good
taken?
question.
I can just also get it. I have a separate body from this person.
I think,
I have my copy of the book is at Brookings, I'm afraid. So I don't have it in front of me and haven't actually looked at it since the last time we had since you came by to do a podcast about it and we had a lot of scotch. But I'm
in the middle of a work day.
I'm particularly partial to the grating cheese image.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, but
I haven't gotten the book yet.
Well, you might. I think maybe you like giving a polar bear a pregnancy test.
Oh, that would be right up my alley, honestly.
Yeah. That could be good, right?
How did you know that?
But yeah, it was a tremendous honor to see a person tattoo one of these illustrations on their body.
Hold on, we have to show everyone this tattoo. I'm gonna share my screen. Hold on. There we go. This is the.
There it is.
That is the really dynamic picture of a person with the fist out.
Mm-hmm.
And explain the actual manatee riding law. Is it a strict liability standard, or is there an appropriate mens rea requirement? Do you have to have criminal intent? I mean, if you're swimming and a manatee swims up underneath you and kind of rises up, and you find yourself kind of like Kate and the butter, just
like in the butter, right?
Inadvertently riding a manatee, would you be in violation of the statute?
I like Kate in the butter. It's like Jonah and the whale. It's like nice. It's like it's good. But so there's a knowingly requirement, so you have to knowingly ride a manatee. So if you say I honestly, like, I was out swimming with my cousin, and frankly I thought that was my cousin, and it turns out it was a manatee. I apologize. You're probably acquitted and you've insulted your cousin, but there you go. But it's a knowingly requirement. But it's not just riding a manatee. It's pinching a manatee.
Yeah,
it's chasing a manatee. Right.
Yeah.
Right. It's giving a manatee a drink. That's a federal crime as well.
Like, wait, like an alcoholic drink or any drink? What if it's thirsty?
Any drink, but yeah, I think alcoholic drinks to manatees is an aggravating factor, would be my guess.
When I was growing up, this actually reminds me, it's very funny. I haven't thought about this in a long time. We used to demand that my father give us whale rides, which was my brother and I holding on to like his back as he like dipped and dived, and he used to joke at how absolutely indignified this was that we called these whale rides. And how much he hated it. See, like, I could have called the manatee rides, and then where would I be? In federal prison. So
it gets worse than that. I think there was a toy product from like the 1950s or 60s called the Daddy Saddle, and it was actually a saddle that you could put on your father's presumably back.
I didn't do
that. Yeah. I don't know if that was discontinued. Like, lawn darts were actually made federal crimes to possess, just like clacker balls and teddy bears that can cut you. Snap bracelets, right? Exactly. Yeah,
they're not federal crimes, but like,
right.
I mean, they just got banned.
Right. That's where tort lawyers made them go out of style. Yeah.
Truly.
So, it is 6:00, which means we should wrap up. But I
can hang up for another hour. I don't have anything to do if you guys want to talk some more. This is pretty funny.
I see in the comments here somebody said, "Don't Google Daddy Saddle," and that's okay. I'm all right with not doing that.
Yeah. So, what is a federal crime that you think we should all aspire to?
Oh my gosh!
Like the one that you've
women
never
voting
seen indicted, but lurks in the back of your mind as like, I will show up pro bono with mad respect for the person indicted for this. Only the coolest commit, violate X crime.
Well, so like sort of my flagship crime that I always end up talking about is making an unreasonable gesture to a horse. And I will take any horse flicking off case that ever comes into federal court. I was recently, on July 4th, reminded that it's explicitly a federal crime to climb Mount Rushmore. And I just thought I would also represent somebody who climbs Mount Rushmore. But I still think that my favorite federal crime that I would like to represent somebody for would be for harvesting falcon semen from the wild without a falcon semen collection permit from the federal government.
Excuse me, what?
Yeah. So I'll say it again because
I'm gonna get a federal crime for wearing bloomers, and you're going like
yeah. But I'm just already thinking about my closing argument, right? About like the guy who collected falcon semen. Like, I don't know how you can get semen from a falcon. Right. But, that I think I'd be into. Really, unfortunately, there's a lot of federal semen crimes. I think they're all hilarious. I know if Ben is ever charged with possession of grated cream cheese, I will defend him pro bono. Or possession of moist Gouda.
That one is... The grated cream cheese is my favorite. I love the picture of it in the book.
Wait, what is this? I don't understand. What's going on?
It's a misbranded food item. The feds thought necessary to specify that you can grate any cheese, but you can't grate cream cheese. Not allowed.
How you would even do it, of course, is...
Right.
Anyway. Think about that,
this is-
folks, as you're grating your cream cheese over the next 23 hours and 7 minutes. No? Yeah. And 57 minutes until we join you again. Mike Chase, thanks so much for joining us. We have no idea who will be with us tomorrow. We'll figure it out as impulse. Do we do?
As we have done every day for 112 days.
Yeah, we will do it again. And just remember, every day now, in lieu of fun, jumps 2 days ahead of the number of days until the election, because that number goes down 1 and we go up 1. We're pulling away from it, folks. So as you grate your cream cheese tonight and ride off into the sunset on your manatee with your infused butter savored in your mouth, wondering what it could have been infused with to make you feel so wonderful. What will you be saying, Kate?
In lieu of fun, what do I possibly have to follow that up with, Ben?
That was intense. That was very intense. I will say that there is some comfort in being here with you two today, because you're the only 2 other people I know who have made the galactically foolish decision to commit to doing something every day without fail every day. It's just a foolish thing to do, and I love it. It's great.
You should do it. You should come do it with us more often, Mike.
Yeah,
I will.
Should. It's really fun.
Yeah,
anytime you want to show up, just tweet at us.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Wake up in a bad mood and be like, I want to go ride my manatee and flip off a horse.
And solicit a coal miner.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah.
I'll send you a cookie, Mike.
All right. I'll send you a book.
tomorrow.
Bye.